YouTube script. The siege that broke an empire. Imagine watching nearly 200 warships appear on the horizon, carrying 40,000 of the most elite soldiers on Earth, armed with over 100 massive cannons, all coming to obliterate your tiny island. You've got 6,000 people total, and only 500 of them have ever held a sword. The smart money says you're absolutely done for. Everyone knows it. The enemy knows it. Even you probably know it. But 4 months later, that unstoppable army limps back to their ships in complete disgrace, leaving behind 30,000 corpses and the shattered remains of their reputation. How on earth did that happen? Well, buckle up, because the story of Malta in 1565 is genuinely one of the most mental military victories in human history, and I promise you, it's going to blow your mind. Right? So, let's set the stage properly. It's the 16th century, and the Mediterranean is basically turning into an Ottoman lake. The Ottoman Empire has just conquered Constantinople. They're expanding in every direction, and they're absolutely dominating the seas. Their navy is crushing everyone. Their trade routes are raking in massive wealth. And frankly, they look unstoppable. But their this one tiny island city smack bang in the middle of the Mediterranean, causing them proper grief. Malta, and it's not the island itself that's the problem. It's who's living on it. The Knights of St. John, also called the Knights of Malta. Now, who are these lads? They're basically a military order that used to fight during the Crusades. Proper hard bastards, if we're being honest. But after getting kicked out of Rhodes back in 1522, they'd been wandering about like a football team without a stadium, until the Holy Roman Emperor basically said, right, you can have Malta. Do what you want with it. And what did they do with it? They turned this rocky little island into a base for absolutely terrorizing Ottoman shipping. They'd raid Muslim merchant vessels, attack Ottoman fleets, and generally make themselves the most annoying thorn in the empire's side imaginable. Sultan Suleiman, the Magnificent, had enough. And when I say he'd had enough, I mean he was absolutely fuming. He's 70 years old, his health's declining, and he's thinking, before I die, I'm wiping these knights off the face of the earth. So in May 1565, the Ottoman fleet rocks up to Malta with 193 warships. Can you imagine being a Maltese villager, looking out to sea, and seeing that? Your heart would sink straight through the floor, wouldn't it? The Ottomans land without any resistance whatsoever. They set up camp on the southern bit of the island, start dragging their cannons into position, and everyone's thinking the same thing. This is going to be over in days. Enter Gimparisot de Valete. He's the Grand Master of the Knights, 71 years old, but apparently still hard as nails. He takes one look at the situation and makes the only sensible decision. He calls everyone back to 3 main fortresses, Fort San Elmo, Fort San Angelo, and Fort Saint-Helo. He knows they can't fight in open ground against 40,000 troops. That'd be suicide. So the strategy is simple. Hold the forts. Wait for reinforcements from Sicily. Easy, yeah, except there's a massive problem. Sicily's promised they'll come help, but when? 1 month, 2 months, 3. Nobody has a clue. And how long before the Ottomans smash through these 3 fortresses? Now here's where it gets interesting. Fort St. Elmo is the smallest of the 3 fortresses. It's perched on this narrow peninsula sticking out into the sea. The walls are only 3 meters thick. There is no proper moat. It can only hold about 1,500 defenders. It wasn't even built to withstand a proper siege. But it's absolutely crucial. If the Ottomans take St. Elmo, they can drag their cannons up and start firing directly at Fort St. Angelo across the bay. And when that happens, everything collapses like dominoes. Mustafa Pasha is the Ottoman commander. He's standing there looking at St. Elmo from a distance, and he's probably smiling to himself. He's broken over 20 fortresses in his career. His experience tells him this little fort will fall in 5 to 7 days, maybe a week if the defenders are particularly stubborn. He could not have been more wrong. The Ottomans start absolutely hammering St. Elmo with 130 cannons. The noise is unbelievable. Day and night, constant thunder of explosions. The walls start crumbling in massive chunks. 200-pound cannonballs are flying through the air, slamming into stone with enough force to shake the entire ground. Dust is everywhere. The sun disappears behind this curtain of black smoke, but the knights don't run. They're patching the walls with sandbags, wood, whatever they can find. Even the corpses of their own mates. Every night when the Ottomans stop firing, the knights crawl out of their shelters, drag stones back into position, and rebuild what got destroyed during the day. It's this brutal cycle repeating itself, over and over. 5 days pass. St. Elmo still stands. 7 days pass. St. Elmo still stands. 10 days pass. Mustafa Pasha is starting to lose his patience. The Ottomans switch tactics. They launch infantry assaults. The Janissaries, the Empire's absolute elite troops, charge up the walls with daggers and swords. They're climbing over rubble, fighting hand-to-hand in the most brutal combat you can imagine. But every time the Ottomans capture a position, the knights immediately they're pushing them back with maces, spears, and this stuff called Greek fire. It's this ancient, incendiary weapon that burns even on water. Absolutely terrifying. Mustafa Pasha genuinely cannot believe what he's seeing. He sends more troops, increases the firepower. But St. Elmo is like this monster that just refuses to die. So how are they holding? Here's the clever bit. Every single night, Grand Master Valette is sending small boats sneaking through the Ottoman blockade. They're bringing in 100, 200 reinforcements into St. Elmo under cover of darkness. These aren't elite warriors, mind you. They're blacksmiths, farmers, aging mercenaries. But they come, and they fight. At the same time, Valette's sending messages to St. Elmo's commander. Hold for 1 more week, just 1 more week. Then the next week, another message. Three more days. Sicily's almost here. But Sicily doesn't come. On day 23, St. Elmo's walls finally collapse completely. The Ottomans pour in like a tide, killing every survivor they find. Only 9 knights manage to escape by swimming across the bay in the darkness. When Mustafa Pasha walks into the fortress, he sees 1,500 Maltese corpses and 8,000 Ottoman corpses. A tiny fort predicted to fall in 5 days has tied up 40,000 Ottoman troops for 31 days. And that's only the beginning. In June, the Ottomans turned their attention to Fort St. Angelo and Fort St. Michael, the 2 remaining main fortresses. This time they've learned their lesson. No more rushing in. They dig siege trenches, build firing towers, and start this relentless bombardment from all sides. But conditions inside the walls are now properly grim. Food's running out. The water's contaminated because they can't bury the dead fast enough. The stench of rotting bodies fills the air. Flies are swarming everywhere. Disease starts spreading, killing more people than the Ottoman cannons. Grand Master Valette, though 71, still goes to the front lines every single day. He's not giving orders from some safe room. He's personally holding a sword, standing beside his men, fighting when needed. There's this story about a young knight who gets frightened and wants to retreat. Valette grabs his shoulder and says, "You're afraid of dying. I'm this old and not dead yet. What are you worried about?" That kind of spirit spreads through the entire garrison. Nobody dares run when the Grand Master's still standing there fighting. In July, the Ottomans launched this massive assault. 15,000 troops charge Fort St. Michael all at once. Janissaries are climbing the walls on rope ladders, blasting gates with explosives. They actually capture part of the ramparts. The Ottoman flag flies on the watchtower. For a few brief minutes, it looks like Malta's fallen. Game over. But Valette doesn't panic. He gathers the 200 most elite knights remaining and personally leads the counter. They charge in like a flaming sword, cut down the celebrating Janissaries, and push the Ottomans off the walls in 20 minutes of absolutely desperate fighting. Mustafa Pasha watches his troops running back in retreat and slams his fist on the table. He's lost 10,000 men in 3 months, and he still hasn't captured anything. In August, everything goes eerily quiet. The Ottomans stop attacking. They just surround the fortresses and wait. The strategy's shifted from break the walls to starve them out. Inside the walls, people start eating rats, shoe leather, anything remotely chewable. Children grow so thin you can see their bones through their skin. Some seriously wounded knights kill themselves so they won't be a burden on the others. Valette sends his 47th desperate message to Sicily. If you don't come within 10 days, Malta will fall. No response. Mustafa Pasha's smiling. He knows victory is close. Just a matter of time now. Then on September 7th, a smoke signal rises from the north side of the island. But it's not from the Ottomans. It's from another fleet. Sicily has finally arrived. 8,000 Spanish and Italian reinforcements land on Malta. Mustafa Pasha immediately turns his forces around to respond, but his troops are absolutely shattered after 4 months of siege. They're hungry, diseased, and morale has nearly collapsed. When the European reinforcements appear on the battlefield, the Ottomans panic, and then something happens that nobody expects. Grandmaster Valette orders the gates opened. 2,000 surviving knights and civilians rush out. But they're not defending anymore. They're attacking. They look like demons returned from hell. Gaunt, skeletal, but with fire in their eyes. Their armors covered in dried blood and battle scars. The Ottomans see them charging and they run. Not because they're outnumbered, but because they genuinely cannot believe these people are still alive. Still have the strength of the fight. Over 3 days, the Ottomans retreat, in complete chaos to their ships. They leave behind their cannons, their weapons, and 30,000 dead soldiers on this tiny rock of an island. Malta has won. So how did 6,000 people defeat 40,000? It wasn't because they were stronger. It wasn't because they had better weapons. It's because they understood something the Ottomans didn't. Time is the most powerful weapon. Fort San Elmo, that tiny fortress predicted to fall in 5 days, held up the Ottomans for 31 days. Those 31 days exhausted the entire Ottoman fleet, collapsed their morale, and created just enough time for reinforcements to arrive. Grandmaster Valette didn't need to defeat the Ottomans in one glorious battle. He just needed to survive long enough for them to defeat themselves. And that's why to this day, Malta still proudly displays the white cross on a red background, the symbol of the knights who turned a tiny island into the graveyard of an empire. This story absolutely fascinates me because it shows that sometimes the greatest victories don't come from overwhelming force. They come from sheer bloody-minded determination and understanding.